Hello, welcome. Thank you for listening. This is my podcast for my outside reading book. After choosing an outside book to read, Mr. Ray let us decide how to get the word out. So today I'm going to be discussing this book and why we should all read it. I thought it would be a good idea to choose a podcast because, number one, I've listened to them so I understand them, so I kind of know where to go and what to do. But another thing is that in the book I read, which we're of course are going to be discussing, the author used it's basically about a little girl, and it shows her naiveness by how she talks because it's like her narrative. So it's very the fluctuation of the book is different than most books because there's no quotation marks. It's just all from like one girl's perspective. So you get a lot of characterization from the book from her, just like about how just the way she talks, the way she perceives life. So I think like doing a podcast is kind of the same thing, kind of my narrative. You can know a lot from me by just listening, and that's what I did in the book. So moving on, we're going to discuss, the book, which I read. It's called The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. I think that's how you say her last name. But it's about, sorry, it's about a little girl who grew up in Chicago on a house on Mango Street. And she's Mexican American, and she kind of just like, it's basically a collection of short stories about her life that through these short stories develop her character, people around her, their characters, and really goes into topics that can be deep, like that are really hard to deal with, like racism, sexual assault, abuse, and really can wake you up. But it's so different because it's from this little girl's story. So you see her naiveness. So that's just a reason already why I've liked it. The reason why I wanted to get into this book is because first I love Chicago. So the fact that the setting was in Chicago, probably around the 1980s. It never really gave a specific time. I would say 1970s to 1990s. I love Chicago, like I said, so I was really drawn to that book in that way, but also because this is a Mexican American writer, and it's about a Mexican girl, and since my mom is from Mexico, I again was, just drawn because I just saw myself in her a little bit, and I've always like thought about being a writer or just had all these stories of my own. And in the book, the girl wants to be a writer, and the author, when she was young, a Mexican American growing up in Chicago, she wanted to be a writer. So I actually do relate a lot to this book in some sort of way. Obviously, the hardships that the little girl went through are different from anyone else's, or at least mine in this case. But it was a good book. Like, I honestly really enjoyed it. I liked how whenever it was speaking Spanish, like it had Spanish words, I kind of understood. And overall, it was just, again, an amazing book. What I like the way it's set up because it's, again, a collection of short stories. So the writing, I don't really know how to describe it, but it's just like, it's definitely different. Basically what I said, there's no quotation marks. Like, there is no quotes. It's all from the girl's perspective. So it goes like, well, he said, and it won't have a quote. So that, like, the writing style in general caught me off guard. But, I mean, it made it have its own little character in its way, and it made it just more interesting. So to talk about this book, she, like, has grown up all over the place. Like, this girl named Esperanza, she lives in Chicago on a house on Mango Street, but that's not her only house. She's been in many other houses. And she, like, just talks about how she hates, moving from another house to another house. And so, basically, this coming of age story really describes and just I put it, kind of just shows how a life would be for a someone who's not that rich. In the inner city, they lived on the south side, and it talked about like a lot of things that you would go through in not a great neighborhood, and how her neighbor, who was also a best friend, was abused by her father and like had bruises, and that she was sexually harassed and her friends were sexually harassed. And but there was this naiveness to it, which I keep on going back to because she's so young. Like, it started off when she was probably around 5 years old, never really gave any dates, but I would say like 5, until she was probably like 16, 17. And it's crazy. One part of the book, it talks about is how she doesn't like her name because her sister has very, like, her two sisters have very normal average name, and her name is Esperanza. And I kind of relate to that because I also have two sisters who, although have Hispanic names in a way, because both of their names are Gabriella and Olivia, but they're pronounced Gabriella y Olivia. And it's never been a big problem that my name's Karina. It's actually pronounced Karina, but they talk about how people butcher her name and people don't care and try to make fun of it, and that's just an experience I've had. So I very, very, very like recommend this book to anyone who's listening. Like, if you have any type of love for Hispanic culture, like, that's already a go. This is a go-to. But I can't like really describe it, but I just really enjoyed it, and I think it should be read by a lot. I think it should definitely be talked about in schools because it brings up a great amount of issues, just like social issues, but also it's a different kind of reading. It's not that long, so people would still enjoy it, but the writing style is something new and fresh, which I really like, and I think anyone would enjoy this who read it. So please, if you want to read it, go ahead, and thank you for listening. Bye.